Moving on to day 4 of creation. So we have the first 3 days separated and set up in this way with the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and the outer courtyard. And we have the land, and we have the waters, and the sky, and the dark, and the light. So on day 4 is when the light's in the midst of heaven. Now this is what really got me thinking that there was a direct correlation with the tabernacle, because the lights would have been on the inside here. And that's where you see the sun and the moon and the stars. And this is in the midst of heaven. It's in front of it. It's not out in the heavens. It was in front of it. And I realized in the midst of the veil and the holy place was the candlestick with the lights, directly correlating with the lights in heaven and the stars and the moon and the sun. Now, when you get to day 5, this is when the fish and the birds are placed on the earth. So you have here the birds in the sky, and you have the fish in the sea. And moving out, you have on the veil, there would have been winged angels. And I believe that directly correlates with the birds. They had it on both veils, but I think it directly correlates with this outside veil. And then once you step outside into the courtyard, there was the basin of water. And this basin of water would have represented filling this basin with fish and all of the sea creatures. Now, on the 6th day is when animals and people were introduced into the creation. And this right here, so we have the animals and the people on the earth. And here would have been the altar that the animal sacrifices would have been performed on behalf of the people. And we have other people out in the courtyard here too, witnessing these outer court ceremonies. Now, one more thing that I think is really interesting is this then will lead into the idea of Adam and Eve and all the scene and the happenings in the Garden of Eden. And I think this correlates directly because when Adam and Eve were formed, they were then introduced into the garden. We hear that phrase, and that means they weren't yet in the garden. And if this follows suit, as I think it does, if this would represent people as well as animals, they would have been introduced into the garden room. And the Garden of Eden was this central place, this middle ground between heaven and earth, where God could come and visit Adam and Eve and walk with them and be with them. And that is exactly what this room represents, as this middle ground between heaven and earth, just as a mountain, and we'd go up to this holy place to converse with God. So for all those reasons, I believe that creation, oh, and here's the throne. We don't want to forget that. The creation story directly correlates with the building of the ancient tabernacle. And it follows this movement of going from God's holy place, their throne, all the way out. And each step leads further and further out until it is all complete. And then there's this going in, and then an exile, where the leaving of the garden. Oh, you can't see the arrow there. There we go. It's going down in creation, and then Adam and Eve are allowed into this space for the time that they're there, and then they leave it, and they have the opportunity to then go through from the beginning here to the end in this ascension with Christ, because all the things in there represent Christ and how we can link ourselves to him by his atonement. And all this was set up from the creation of the world.